I'm a telecom regulator and I will confine my discussion to only content moderation with the perspective that cybersecurity and freedom of expression are complementary, not contradictory. And I will remain also strictly confined to experience only. I'll bring in some ground realities. A lot of points have come up. Let us also see what's happening on the ground. BTRC does only content moderation. That too, BTRC does not judge any content. Whether a content is harmful, malicious or not, we are not here to judge. We receive requests from various authorities, including cybersecurity agency, law enforcement agencies, and etc., 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 so that a content needs to be taken down. And depending on that, we coordinate and instruct our local operators or international platforms, and etc., etc. If I just go through a little statistics, then we'll have some insight. For example, in last 1 year, we had requested to various platforms, both at home and abroad, various platforms, around 27,000 posts or links to be taken down. And out of that, 17,000 were taken down, which is around 63% of what we have requested. So the insight from here is that at least 37% disagreement we have with the service providers or platforms. Why do we have this disagreement and where do we have this disagreement? If we break it down a little further, we have further insight. If we see the links or posts related to suicide or self-harm injury, 100% were taken down. Safety, child abuse, 98%. Nudity, adult content, 79%. Terrorism, 75%. But on the other hand, the highest request that we get is about misinformation, disinformation, fake news, etc. And the taking down percentage is only 56%. The second highest request we get about hate speech, 53%. More interestingly, which we think is very dangerous, harmful and dangerous acts, only 24%. Misleading impersonation, only 21%. The insight we get from here is the wider that you have the range of potential subjective interpretation, where this range is wider, you have more disagreement. So then the first challenge begins. Many of you have tried to highlight. The first challenge is legal challenge, that many definitions are actually, I will not say vague, but it's open to wider interpretation. But on the contrary, as Dr. Bharat also alluded to, it is nearly impossible to define everything objectively in cyberspace. So which means there will be always a subjective interpretation and we need to better cope with that. So the discussion is how better we cope with that. If we see in our new Cybersecurity Act, earlier there was no due process. There was no clear due process. Now we have due process. It is said we have a judicial authorization requirement, authorization by a tribunal we require, which is true. But then, as I said, that in many emergencies, there is no time to take this approval. So the executives, law enforcement agencies, they have to call a shot of judgment. It will always be there. They will have to be allowed to call a shot of judgment. So this act allows them call a shot of judgment, but with a restriction. Restriction means within 3 days, they have to take an approval or authorization from the tribunal. That creates the first challenge, because if you have seen, BTRC is not mandated to flag, judge the content. So if there are other agencies who are judging the content, requesting either directly or through cybersecurity agency to BTRC, and BTRC is requesting somebody else. And meantime, the one who had requested, within 3 days, he is supposed to take this authorization and send it to BTRC and BTRC to media. If not, then after 3 days, that link or that post has to be opened. That creates a technical challenge for the regulator and for the service providers, because from many platforms, once you have taken it down, after 3 days, how do you take it up? That is a new challenge that the Act has created. So this, I think, it needs to be addressed somehow. Let us talk of the role of the executives, or the capacity of the executives. When I say executive, I mean those who are enforcing. All executives, whosoever the stakeholders are, they're supposed to have the capacity to detect and distinguish a crime. There we have a lot of room to improve. Earlier, the role itself was not very defined. Somebody has already said that people do not know whether BTRC is regulating or somebody else is regulating. This Act has given a better clarity. However, the role needs to be further clarified. Even if I give you an example, even we get orders from court. Court is ordering BTRC to furnish them with some media content, the mainstream media. Even the court is not at times sure what to ask from whom. It is because there is a confusion about the role of the task. We have also a huge room to improve on interagency coordination in developing capacity. Because the role is not defined, so we do not know who should develop what capacity. For example, if you give an example of last year, say the Ministry of Women and Children, they are concerned to protect women, also online. So they were thinking they should have a cyber team who should give the online protection. Now you see, they may be experts on social affairs, on women affairs, on children, but they are not experts on telecom. They are not experts on technology. So if the technological platforms are developed by them, so what the technological people are doing. So this interagency coordination, this culture needs a huge improvement actually. And if I may say, that is one of the root problems why our progress is so slow. Then coming to, I'll take a little time. Then coming to executives, as I was saying, those who will call the shot, they will have judgment. They need training on how to interpret. I'm not talking of intentional misjudgment, that is beyond correction, that's a different thing. But about how to interpret and identify the crime, this is where I think we need a wider training program and etc. What BTRC does, BTRC now and then at a functional level, we sit down with law enforcement agencies, cybersecurity agencies, and our telecom operators at a functional level to exchange view about what sort of problems they're facing and how to interpret things and how to report particularly. But this is not enough. I think international experts, local experts, platforms, we need to regularly sit down and train ourselves. There is another serious issue is lack of public awareness about the available agencies, reporting agencies, who to go to. Somebody having a problem on cyber world, where does he or she go to? I've heard from last that they have a platform. I don't know, this is the first time I have heard. I myself do not know. Many people, we do not know what platforms are available for reporting. There is a serious awareness gap that we notice. BTRC does not have a mandate of judging the content, that's okay. But all the requests ultimately boils down to BTRC, and BTRC blindly sends it to. BTRC does not also have a mandate of rejecting requests. I think BTRC should have. As a final check, BTRC should have, if not of judging the content and selecting the content, at least of rejecting, so that the difference, 37% difference of opinion that we have, that reduces. Then let us come to practicing how platform governance or the service providers, how we are interacting with them. All the platforms, international platforms, local platforms, they are supposed to have capacity to prevent harm, protect vulnerable groups, and ensure safe environment. That is globally understood. Local service providers have limited capability. Local service provider, particularly say mobile networks. The mobile network operators or MNOs, they have a better capability. They have still limited capability of self-regulation of adult content sort of thing, nothing beyond that. ISP, they hardly have any capability of self-moderation, self-regulation, hardly any capability. When they are tasked to block a content, there also they have very limited capability. So we need to improve there. Larger platforms, for example, Meta, for example, YouTube and etc. They have a mind of their own, means they have their own rules, they have their own judgment, and they have their own enforcement system. It's not always, and again Dr. Barta was hinting up, it's not always that they will listen to you. They have their own mind. Then another challenge comes in, the difference of opinion between the platform standards and the local laws. Although our laws are evolving and their laws are also evolving, I see a hope that slowly and gradually this gap is reducing. But mind my words, significant gap still exists between the viewpoints of local and other laws. Opaque content moderation, you have already said, I will not go to that. We see a requirement, serious requirement of fact-checking. And this fact-checking requirement is increasing every day. That's a practical problem that we have. But we have very limited fact-checking capability. And about the international platforms, what capability they have, that is also very opaque. That is also not very transparent. We need to find out. Response time. As I said, 63% requests they have kept us. But with what time? Oftentimes we have seen that was taken down after the damage has been done. So that response time is still huge. I think recently, this year, India has passed a bill, 3 hours rule. So they say to these international platform operators that once government marks a harmful content, they have to take it down within 3 hours. I don't know what is happening with the implementation, but a rule has been passed. Platform operators are supposed to, and they should, morally also, they should help us by sharing identity of the offenders. Although, IG was supposed to be here, police could say better, but they are cooperative, but not cooperative enough and not fast enough in cooperating on these issues. They should do. Platform localization, there are issues which have also come up, legal presence that we need in the country. Moreover, the respect to local language, local context. Many platforms, at least Meta is trying, after pursuing for long years, they are trying to have some respect and some dedicated agents for contextual analysis, but that is not enough. Platform liability, as you say, platform liability pressure, yes. Previously, there was no Data Protection Act or ordinance in the country. That itself was a pressure. Not having a law, protection law, was a pressure for the. But when we had a PDPO that the Honorable Advisor was referring to, the Personal and Data Protection Ordinance that we had, then they had different pressure. They had a problem with data localization because that had mandated data must be localized. Data localization, then criminal liability for breaches, arrest provisions, financial penalties, etc., etc. However, when this was reviewed and converted into act, many of those were addressed in the end. If I may say, from our experience, what are the points that we suggest for improving this platform accountability or platform governance? I would say we'll have to strive to keep reducing the gaps, the legal gaps between, and which is happening. Then again, you have said about algorithmic moderation. We need a transparency of how these platforms are using algorithms for their moderation. This remains opaque. We should ask them, maybe through you, that at least what they can do is they can limit the reach of any unverified post. Let them work with the verified posts, but they should limit the reach of the unverified post. This is what our experience is. We also suggest AI is becoming a new opportunity and a threat. We cannot control that, but at least we can mandate that every AI content must be marked separately. We give an indication that is an AI content and leave it to the audience to judge how they take it. We also want to be bold in saying that the platforms should not censor people who are already widely accounted for. For example, mainstream media. Mainstream media has an accountability. For example, elected officials, they have a wider accountability. So whatever they post, platform should not censor that because they have already wider accountability. Say, let me refer to a case in Nigeria in 2001 and 2002, those of you know. Twitter deleted, it took down one post of President Buhari. So Nigeria had banned Twitter. It remained banned for about 7 months. So they had to reinstate the post, and they had gone and registered in Nigeria. That's an interesting case. Then local legal presence mandating is not far. It's just last year. Brazil had mandated that. Brazil had banned X for not having their legal presence in Brazil. They banned it for 2 months. Then X had to send a representative. So I don't know how we can be that bold, but we need to. There are transparency report published, these are okay. Local service providers, in our case, they cannot charge the content, that's okay. But as we said, illegal contents, there is nothing to be charged about illegal contents, particularly when it comes to adult content, online gambling, etc., etc. I think our local service providers should be compelled to have capacity to at least handle this illegal content. I will summarize. I will summarize saying, non-regulation is not an option of ensuring freedom of expression. Because over-regulation, yes, I understand, but non-regulation has a risk of increasing communal violence, gender-based harassment, fraud, and all radicalization, etc. But we'll have to begin from legal instrument. And the legal instrument, the success would depend on how well this is interpreted, how well this is implemented, but I like to highlight more on how it evolves. We have not discussed on that. About evolution of these laws, if I'm allowed to give an analogy, we are a flat-prone country. We can imagine in a situation where a village in the or a suburb of town is suddenly flooded, where the earth is under the water, and if you have 2-3 feet water above, you don't see the earth anymore. You have a new surface, water surface, but you see the marks. You have plants and trees and these poles and that pole, which marks that there was a road under this water. There is a canal under this water. In this analogy, if you say the earth's surface was our physical world and the water surface is what the internet brings, then we come something close to what Dr. Bharata was trying to say, do not invent new crime. A hate speech is a hate speech, there in the physical world, same in the digital world. A theft is a theft in the physical world and digital world. What we need to do is, we need to identify the markers. But if we don't do that, why it has happened? It has happened because in technology world, we have started with the wrong foot. The moment we have said cyber security, the cyber world came first. So technocrats led all this move of cyber security, etc., etc. And we have ignored the word security. And for security in the physical world, we have different measures. Now we are correcting ourselves. That's okay. But, okay. India again has done one thing. When legal instruments evolve in the right way. You see, 21, 22, there was a farmers' movement, you remember. There was a lot of tension going on. Twitter had declined to take down those posts. But the government our government could force them to take down the posts because their IT rules of that same year had mandated that. Authorization and reporting of content moderation, to be clear and realistic. as I have first pointed out, that in our Act today also, ambiguity remains. In case of capacity building, I would say defining roles and developing integrated capacity, that's a very, very important issue. And then efficient coordination mechanism, if I may also highlight, this is another a very Achilles heel that we have. Inter-agency coordination mechanism had always remained very vague, and that's why the responsibilities could not be always performed. So now the Act opens up a way. Local language moderation, training is important of all, judiciary, law enforcement agencies, and regulators. I will end by saying I cannot overemphasize awareness, the need for awareness. I will not discuss on that, but I will just highlight a very interesting trend that if you have noticed, deepfake video. We have first noticed during the Russo-Ukrainian war, at the beginning of the war. We have seen President Zelensky's deepfake video, etc., etc. In our country, we started facing it after July Revolution, July Uprising. Seriously, we started facing it. This time, right before the election, the law enforcement agencies, their primary concern was that deepfake may create havoc. But nothing has happened. On the contrary, please note that. On the contrary, what has happened is deepfake did not divert people wrongly. The reverse has happened. People have stopped believing in real videos. You may laugh, but that's, you see. So what I'm trying to say, people learn fast. So awareness could be actually our real tool to handle this. You can give a lot many examples where you can see that people are learning very fast and people are not being fooled right away. So let us use that. Thank you.